you've ever wondered what Century Arms did to these MAS-36s during their 308 conversion process, you're in the right place. I've got a MAS-36 here that I purchased from Hunter's Lodge and originally came through Century Arms, and I'll be disassembling it and you'll get an idea of what Century Arms did, a fix I did to improve it, and a quick safety check. This isn't just any rifle project though, however. I'm doing all of this for my World War II French resistance reenacting. When I first got this French MAS-36 bolt action rifle, the bolt was unbelievably stiff. It cocks when you rotate it up, but pulling it back felt like I had to fight it. I actually cut myself between the bolt handle and the sight here. I removed the bolt, and I found a lot of grime in the bolt body, magazine well, and underneath the sight bridge. I wiped everything down with a rag soaked in 100% mineral oil, and the grime came off in layers. While cleaning, I noticed visible machining grooves and friction streaks from rough machining from when they originally turned the bolt. I then removed the firing pin, which is just quite simple. Just push the plunger and rotate the end cap. I love the design, so simplistic. Without the firing pin installed, I then tested the bolt and the bolt cycled easier, confirming it was a contributing factor, but not the main source of that resistance. I also removed the magazine follower, spring, and floor plate, and also tested the bolt without those components. There was no real noticeable difference. And of course the follower was dirty and the spring, and cleaning it really did not improve the function of the bolt. I further cleaned the magazine well and under the sight and most of the contact points around the bolt. This cleaning and removing the firing pin all helped reduce friction, but of course I can't just leave out the firing pin. But with all this done, it was still way too hard to cycle. My next step in the process might feel a little drastic to some, but the bolt still required more attention as it wasn't quite functioning right and was really too hard to use. This MAS-36 bolt wasn't just dirty, its machining finish was rough, and there were visible grooves from turning it that were acting kind of like sandpaper and adding friction when operating the action. Do you think this was from the original manufacturing process, or is it thanks to Century Arms and their lovely work? Share your thoughts in the comments. Anyways, to try and improve the bolt operation, I hand sanded the bolt with some fine emery cloth to gently knock down those ridges and remove those high spots. While I didn't get anywhere to a precision finish that was super smooth, this sanding made the biggest single improvement. The bolt now cycled much easier, though still harder than some of my other bolt action rifles. To see what Century Arms had done under the wood, I removed the handguards. My flathead spanner bits were unfortunately a little too large, so I took them over to the sander and then carefully ground them thinner so they would fit into the screws so that I wouldn't damage either the screws or the wood or any other part of the rifle. That let me remove the forend and the top handguard. The front barrel band unfortunately had a stuck screw, so I used a rubber mallet to gently persuade the forend and the barrel band off the barrel assembly. Once off, I extracted that screw. Under the wood, I found some light surface rust on the barrel. Not too bad, and I think it's salvageable. It's mostly surface and not very deep. With all the wood off, I could see exactly what Century Arms did during the 308 conversion. They removed the barrel, cut back part of the chamber, and then rethreaded the outside, removing some of that shoulder, moving it back, and then rechambered and reamed it to 308. After that, they cut the forend and the metal tab that's supposed to hook onto the receiver, and they roughly carved the wood so it would fit into the receiver. They cut the tab in such a way that only one screw remained where it should have had two, and removed the only thing that connected the forend to the receiver. That needed fixing.
Okay, as much as I don't want to do this, I think I'm going to have to cut back a little bit of this wood here, lower it, weld a bump out where the metal actually comes down here and extends this way, and then I'll need to weld or bend up a piece of metal so it can grab the metal frame, which is right here. Right here. All I need is really a chunk. It comes underneath like that, comes to here, and has another piece of weld or metal right there.
I decided to fabricate a replacement plate from bed frame angle iron steel, which was of similar thickness to what I think was there originally. And I cut a rough rectangular shape out of the steel with the angle grinder, sanded the edges for a smoother side and also to have a good welding surface. and then smoothed the ragged original cuts on the forend connector tab made by Century Arms. Thank you, Century Arms, for extra work. I welded a new bottom plate onto the connector tab and added a second piece on top of it to create a narrow slot that hooks onto the receiver, and then filed and ground the weld smooth and then cleaned up that joint, or that point where it would connect into the receiver. I had to rework it a few times until the fit was perfect and it connected correctly into the receiver. That slot locks onto the forend on the receiver. Without it, the forend was effectively only held on by the front sight blade, which is obscure, inaccurate, and a common complaint on these conversions when reading different forums like Reddit and any other place on the internet that talks about these Century Arms conversions. As to be expected, the new connector tab did not fit into the forend because of course Century Arms hadn't carved the wood to accommodate this piece that I had made. This next part made me feel a little uneasy as I hate modifying, cutting, and removing any material from these mil-surp pieces. What made me a little easier on this was knowing that Century Arms had already done the damage and I was just trying to salvage what they had done. First, I used a mallet and chisel to remove the bulk of the material. Then I used a carving knife and some hand chisels for some fine fitting. I removed a little wood, test fitted, removed more, and then repeated until the wood slot in the forend accepted the metal and fit properly to the receiver. While the rifle was apart, I removed the stock. One screw in the trigger guard and the stock pivots up and off. It's a simple and elegant design showing how minimal the MAS-36 is compared to other period rifles. Personally, I think the simplicity is neat and elegant in its own right. With the French MAS-36 rifle apart, I inspected the fire control group. It was dirty, of course, like the rest of the rifle, and needed cleaning and a fresh coat of oil. For the initial cleaning, I used 3-in-1 oil, mostly mineral oil with some light additives. There's some controversy around using it for this application, but it's practical and expensive for a heavy initial grime cleaning. At this point, as you might expect, after cleaning this section down, the rag came away blackened. I'm sure this dirt wasn't helping anything function smoothly. I tested the bolt again. It was freer than at the start, but still not perfect. While I had it almost all the way apart, I cycled the bolt repeatedly to help wear in the mechanism and smooth out the operation without having to fight the additional friction of all the parts like the firing pin. I can't just let that rust sit there on the barrel. I want to address it and preserve the metal for the future. I initially carded it with some fine steel wool to remove any red oxide or rust scale. I first stripped off all the oils on the barrel and receiver with acetone on a paper towel, and then ran all the metal parts through my homemade steam chamber for 15 to 30 minutes, and then carding in between each pass and then letting it dry with heat. As you can see, my DIY steam chamber is quite simple. It's just a section of PVC pipe and a bucket with a wallpaper steamer providing the steam. Steaming the metal rifle parts has its risks though. It can induce moisture and can cause flash rust. But with the existing oxide on this piece, in my opinion, it was worth the risk. After steaming and letting the metal dry with heat, I let the parts sit for 20 to 48 hours to ensure no trapped moisture remained. Then I applied multiple coats of 100% mineral oil to protect it. I ran the bolt and all the small metal parts through the same process to loosen grime and protect the surfaces. The steam didn't really improve the bolt operation, but for dirty rifles, it's an important step to stabilize the corrosion, and also it seems to loosen up a lot of the built up dirt. So with the stock off, I inspected it and I found some light mold, some little white fuzz. I applied acetone to remove the surface oil so I could access the mold itself. Looking back, as I was using acetone, I probably should have worn gloves, but I didn't. So with the oils removed, I soaked the wood with white vinegar to kill the mold. So after using the white vinegar, I set aside the stock and let it dry for around 48 hours. And then I re-oiled the wood using tung oil to help restore the oils I had removed with the acetone. I then applied tung oil over the rest of the stock and the rest of the wood. Applying this oil helped remove any extra surface dirt and also helped improve the finish and seal the wood to help protect it when out on the reenactment battlefield in the future. And then all those small metal pieces, these screws, the bands, the fittings to the MAS-36 rifle, they all went through the same steam, clean, dry, and oil routine that the barrel and receiver went through. With that complete, I coated them all in a thin layer of 100% mineral oil as well, and then I reassembled the rifle. This is my favorite part of this whole process, the reassembly. The French MAS-36 goes together quickly because it has fewer parts than rifles like the Lee-Enfield. Once assembled, I added a little more oil to the action and then cycled the bolt. It felt much better compared to when I first started. As a quick initial safety check, I checked the head spacing on this Hunter's Lodge Century Arms import using a 308 no-go gauge. So I first removed the firing pin, and now I have the no-go gauge in. Let's close it and see if it goes all the way into battery or not. No, it does not. Look, right there. That is really good news, saying that the headspace is at least not overly large, probably right on. I skipped the field gauge since it's a little larger in size, so if the no-go doesn't fit, the field gauge definitely won't. The bolt didn't close on the no-go, which was a relief given that this was converted by Century Arms. With all of this done, I wanted to test it before taking it out to the reenactment battlefield. So to test it, I only had blanks, so I did a short test firing to verify the function and to make sure the forend lockup held up under use. Everything cycled correctly and the forend stayed secure. I inspected the spent blanks for any sign of, well, swelling or deformation. Everything checked out. It should be safe for use when reenacting. Alright, that's the entire overhaul process. This Hunter's Lodge MAS-36, originally imported through Century Arms and converted by them, started off stiff, dirty, and modified. But step by step, we cleaned up the grime, sanded the bolt, fabricated a new front tab for the forend, carved the wood so it would fit, and then treated the surface rust. Re-oiled everything, reassembled, and then tested the action. I'd love tips if you've worked on MAS-36 rifles before. How would you improve this action? Anything you'd do differently? Drop your thoughts in the comments. MAS-36 experts, I'm listening. For other viewers, what are your thoughts? Is the simplistic design of the MAS-36 elegant, rugged, and functional? Or would you add complexity, like a safety, even though that the French philosophy was to leave the chamber empty as a safety measure? If you found this useful, share it with somebody into history or mil-surp rifles and hit subscribe. Here on Brave Builds, we don't just restore gear, we build a better understanding of the tools and history of World War II, and through that we build a clearer picture of the bravery of the people behind them.